I've been daily driving the VNM Xtreme for over half a year now, 32 Newton meters. Yes, it's quite the workout, but these are the bases that surprised me the most this year. Quick disclosure, the bases were provided by VNM and SimMotion for the review, but all the opinions are my own, and they of course did not have any impact on the script or what I'm saying. So yeah, VNM surprised me quite a bit, to be honest. Small company out of Vietnam. I did not have them on my radar like at all. I always knew they were making decent pedals, shifters, motion and stuff like that. But somehow when they released the direct drives, I was like, whatever. Did not care too much about it until I saw some reviews on YouTube and I got curious. So this was one of the very rare cases where I actually reached out to a company and asked for a review unit, and they gladly provided one, so thank you very much. And wow, I was wrong, like these bases are absolutely insane. But nowadays also every base is kind of good. The differences are very subtle, and I find testing direct drives and making a video about it always very difficult. You can't really put the feelings you have for force feedback into numbers, and words also are kind of hard to find to describe how a bass feels. So for me, the features and the price are the real selling points for direct drive, and VNM absolutely delivers in that regard. Huge torque for a fair price, check with the Xtreme. Reasonable torque for an even fairer price, yes, also check. We have an amazing quick release with 35 euros for wheel side, check. True USB pass-through, ready for any USB wheel, check. Telemetry based force feedback, check. Telemetry based effects, yeah, also check. You probably get the idea, these bases pretty much do it all. I did test these across multiple sims and against nearly every major competitor, and this is now really my favorite bass. I'm not saying it's the best in the world, because in the end force feedback is a very subjective thing, but it's the bass I always come back to after testing other basses. Let's start with specs and build quality. Build quality absolutely flawless, matte black. You know it by now, I really like this basic design without any flashy elements. There are 4 different versions of the bass. There's the Premier that we have here with 13 Newton meters for $699. There's the Elite at 18 Newton meters for $899. The Supreme at 25 Newton meters for 1,199 euros, and the Xtreme with 32 Newton meters for 1,379 euros. You can get an optional slip ring for 85 euros. It's very likely that this will be bundled into the bases later and maybe result in a slight price increase, but all these prices that I mentioned were with taxes in Germany. On the Xtreme base, there's only the front mounting option, very similar to the Simucube or Midge pattern. The only thing you need to be aware of, this little ring here, this collar, is a bit bigger than on other bases, so it will not fit some front mounts. For example, for the SimLab P1X front mount, you need a little spacer that moves the base these few millimeters that the ring protrudes to the back. The SimCore mount that I have fits perfectly fine. All the other 3 variants of the bases have the front mount, they have a side mount, and additionally a bottom mount. I would love to see the bottom mount on the Xtreme as well, because it's kind of my favorite way to mount a bass, but yeah, you cannot have it all. All variants feature a 5-pole pair industrial servo motor. The stator weight I would say is medium. I've definitely had basses with more natural inertia, but also basses with way less natural inertia, like Simagic stuff for example. A very clean, functional look, no useless shell around it with LEDs pretending to be design. We also get 23-bit encoders on the whole lineup. Definitely more than enough precision. Also keep in mind, this has nothing to do with the output to the game. Like to the game, it's probably 12-bit or 13-bit, probably already more than enough. This is for the internal force feedback processing. That's why it's important that you have a decent encoder. As long as we have like 20 bits or so, or probably even 18 bits or so, is more than sufficient. It's mostly marketing, but it doesn't hurt to have a premium high resolution encoder, and with 23 bits we are definitely on the higher end here. With the Xtreme you also get a fancy aluminum red black emergency stop button. With the 3 cheaper variants you get a basic one made out of plastic, like the typical black yellow design that we see on other bases. And one cool thing, the warranty recently was increased to 2 years. It was 1 year before, and they also retroactively did that for all existing buyers. So if you buy one of these now, you get 2 years of warranty. It's a standard in the EU anyways, but for worldwide warranty cases, everyone gets those 2 years now. Let's talk about the quick release and the USB pass-through. I mean, of course you can use any quick release that you want, but VNM has their own and it's very good. It's a lever style quick release. So you open the lever here, then you put on your wheel, you close the lever, done. It's not as fast as a QR2, for example, or an NRG QR, but a wheel side for 35 euros, including USB pass-through, is really hard to beat. It's very similar to what SimLab or HRS is doing with the Xero Play system. I would say this is absolutely comparable. No play, build quality is good. And you see here, this is where the boards would typically mount. So you have one on the base side, one on the wheel side with pogo pins. This is how the connection is done. And like that, you get a full USB pass-through system. You don't need batteries, no Bluetooth, no proprietary nonsense. It just works with every USB wheel. One thing I can recommend, especially if you have a wheel with a display and maybe a lot of LEDs, try to avoid to use these long coiled cables from the steering wheel to the QR, because voltage drop can become an issue. The higher the current, the more significant the voltage drop, the internal resistance on the cable becomes, and it can lead to reconnects or display dropping out. So try to connect it internally whenever possible. I think wheel manufacturers will implement that more and more in the future. But I heard VNM is also making cables for the major brands. I know Bavarian will be supported, GSI, Usher, and probably others as well. At least at SimMotion you will be able to get these in the future. One little problem, some wheels might need a spacer because this lever, I mean, this is a very, very low profile design, as you can see here. Like, this is really, really thin. And if you have shifters or clutches that are big and protrude a lot, it can interfere with this lever arm maybe a little bit. I tried a lot of wheels. I didn't have issues with any of them, but I remember having issues with the Xero Play from SimLab on a few wheels. And I guess that will be very similar here as well, so keep that in mind. But yeah, the QR, functional, durable, slightly bulky if you look at the whole thing, but there's Xero Play, and for 35 euros that is hard to beat. I don't use the slip ring here on this base. I use my own custom QR with the cable on the base side, but the slip ring is exchangeable. It mounts in between the base and this base side assembly, and it has a USB-C cable sticking out on the side, similar to the VRS. So you do get all the benefits of USB pass-through and the downsides of a slip ring that will wear over time. Well, if it does, you can easily replace it, and at 85 euros, I think that's not a big deal. And let's be honest, the slip ring should last pretty much forever. I mean, yeah, there will be wear, but it will last for many, many, many years typically. One thing I want to mention early is community and support, because I think this is one of the big pluses of this whole ecosystem at VNM. We probably get the best support team in sim racing right now. The devs are active daily on Discord, and Juan, I think the owner of VNM, is probably the nicest person to deal with in the world of sim racing. He's always super, super helpful and supportive and looking for feedback and everything I can. It's been a joy to work together with VNM. Feature requests that you see on the Discord often turn into beta firmwares that you can test within hours. And in general, it's a very transparent, polite, and always listening kind of community there. It's really refreshing to see. The firmware gets updated all the time. They can improve there. Sometimes, like, I don't even know where to find the latest beta firmware or release firmware. Like, some is on the GitHub and then website and then some on the Discord. It reminds me of early VRS days where you never really knew where to get stuff. So they can improve there. But honestly, this platform is evolving really rapidly with great features all the time. And yeah, the roadmap feels very community driven. It feels like a genuine open conversation and not like corporate PR like with some others. This very agile style also comes with the downside of an agile environment. Documentation could be better. Sometimes you're on your own or you need to ask on the Discord. I mean, you will get answers quickly, but I think the whole documentation and where to find what is something where VNM can improve. Let's talk about one of the big selling points of the space, the telemetry force feedback and the telemetry effects. For the effects, we have built in stuff like ABS vibration, wheel lock, wheel slip feedback, road texture, enhanced curb vibrations. You can have oversteer, understeer on the bass, gear shift, RPM, stuff like that. Everything is fully tunable. I'll show it to you when we talk about the software later. But all these definitely add immersion without feeling like added on top, even though they are, but it still feels like part of the whole experience, if that makes sense. And then we also get a full, complete different flavor of force feedback. The telemetry driven force feedback is like completely different than the direct input force feedback. It can be better, it can be worse. It depends on the game. It depends on what the game sends to the bass. But I think it's cool to have a second option available. You can try which one you like better and then just use whatever you prefer. Keep in mind, it does add a little bit of latency. For example, on iRacing with the 60 Hz processing, you get like around 16 milliseconds of added latency, but it's the same if you use iRacing 360 Hz force feedback, for example, or this Myra app, or IRFFB is even like 30 milliseconds, I think. Some people feel it, some people don't feel it. For me, it depends. On some games I can feel it, on some I can't. But I think it's great that we have this telemetry-driven force feedback because it just increases the chances to find the perfect force feedback for you. And now VNM also implemented something, it's called tick mode, and that is, in my opinion, I hate this word, but that's quite the game changer and feels like force feedback 2.0. So what is tick mode? That is a telemetry input combine mode. What it does is it blends the normal direct input force feedback with the telemetry layer. And by the way, this is one of those examples from the community input. I remember reading discussions how telemetry force feedback can introduce oscillations because of the latency, and somebody recommended, why can't we just try to mix the normal force feedback with the telemetry force feedback, and bam, a few hours later there was a test version. And this tick mode is adjustable. You can blend it from 0 to 100%, and that number tells you how much of the force feedback is coming from the direct input and how much from the telemetry. And it can fix slightly inconsistent feel you sometimes get of pure telemetry mode. It can fix stuff like oscillations. And mixing and matching the two together can be really, really nice. For example, on LMU, I'm not a big fan of the telemetry mode because it's too detailed. That game puts out too much. But in tick mode, with maybe 20-30% of telemetry, that feels absolutely amazing, and it also fixes one of the issues that some people have where on low speed corners you don't feel as much force feedback anymore. Not the case if you use the telemetry force feedback. And overall it feels like adding the cues that only a motion rig would give you on top of your force feedback. I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense. Motion also works with that telemetry output. So having that available in the force feedback is really, really nice. I think this is one of the most interesting innovations on any bass right now. Telemetry effects were available on AccuForce 10 years ago or so, but I think not in many games, and also not a full force feedback replacement. I don't know, I've never tried AccuForce. I just wanted to mention that VNM were not the first, but I think the first that actually brought it to the mass market in a way that is very beneficial. Something I would love to see is an EQ style control like we see on the new Simucube 3, for example, or like what Mozart had for ages, because especially the telemetry stuff can get really noisy. Like there's so much details in it, and I would love to, for example, turn down the curbs a little bit or something, or the higher frequency stuff. Would be nice to get an EQ control for the force feedback, maybe separated in direct input and telemetry as well. In general, the force feedback, I mean, I'm mainly using the Xtreme with 32 Newton meters, is really, really good. I'm using it at the full 32 Newton meters. It is a nice workout. Who really needs 32 Newton meter? Probably nobody, unless you really want to push yourself to the limit, get a nice workout done, or simulate something like an Indy car. These cars can have up to 40 Newton meters of force in their steering rack. So it really depends on what car you're trying to accurately replicate. But in general, the force feedback feels the most immediate and responsive of any bass that I've tried. The latency seems to be very, very low on these compared to the competition. And in general, the torque delivery and everything is just at the highest level, I think. you have a massive dynamic range with 32 Newton meters. It's really, really hard to get this bass to clipping. And the smoothness filter in the software lets you remove those notches you have in the force feedback signal, because force feedback is a digital signal, and especially iRacing, for example, with 60 Hz output, you feel the steps without smoothing. So there's one slider in the software. I wish it was a little bit more granular, maybe like a interpolation filter, maybe an adjustable slew rate and responsiveness of the filter. I would love a little bit more control there than only the one slider, but it still works fine like this. Tire slip feedback, road textures absolutely excellent. The track surface feels really, really good. The downside, of course, is you need a sim with proper telemetry output. Like, if you have a sim maybe without laser scan tracks, it will not feel as good, but like, for example, newer stuff on iRacing, ACC, AMS2, LMU, it just feels absolutely excellent. And keep in mind, even if you have an older game, you can still use the direct input force feedback and it will feel like any other bass pretty much. I think what will be interesting for a lot of people is, does the force feedback on the smaller ones, the Premier I have here for example, feel different compared to the top tier model? And on the same firmware, and with the same settings, it's very, very comparable. Like, this 13 Newton meter bass is probably perfect for many people as a daily driver bass, 13 Newton meters. It's still reasonably strong. You will not get fatigue as fast as on the 32, of course. All these basses, by the way, are really super, super silent. There's no cogging, even with the motor turned off here right now. You can feel like it's perfectly smooth. And the force feedback is really, really close between the Xtreme and the, what is this, Premier, the 30 Newton meter variant. It's just less brutal, and it will obviously clip faster because you have less headroom available. I know GT3 cars up to 10 Newton meters or so, nobody needs more, but keep in mind, there are still peaks in force feedback, so it will still peak over those 10 Newton meters, and this will get lost if you have a bass that only can deliver 30 Newton meter, for example. But in general, for most people, this will probably be fine. I've used this for a few weeks, so I had it turned up quite a bit. There was no loss of force feedback after some time, at least nothing I could feel. The bass does get a little bit warm, there is no active cooling, but that's completely normal. I know some people are always worried about the basses getting warm, but these are industrial servo motors. They are made for like over 100 degrees easily. And so if the surface gets like 50 degrees or so, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. I still would probably recommend to get at least the Elite with 18 Newton meters for a little more headroom, unless you really know you're going to use low force feedback, then this will probably be fine. But $699 to $899, it's not that big of a price jump for almost 50% more torque. I would do it. And if anything, in the force feedback that is noticeable, I would say this bass maybe feels a little bit faster than the Xtreme, because obviously the rotating part here is lighter than on the much bigger Xtreme. So it only makes sense if the slew rate and everything is comparable, then a smaller, lighter stator will accelerate faster. That's just physics. I don't know if I would really be able to tell them apart if I set the Xtreme to 13 Newton meter as well and then try them out. But yeah, I think we'll talk about the software and the UI next. It's a little bit of Winamp wants their UI designer back. Functionally, the software is very solid. Visually, it feels like 90s or early 2000s or so. But let's actually have a look at it. You get, like, this is how it looks. And this is, like, there are different themes. Like, this can look even more old school, but yeah, it's not that important, let's be honest. What do we have here? So this is like a little info box, which firmware version you're on, what the force feedback mode is, the maximum torque. I don't know why there's a max torque mode. For what? Like, there's a slider, why do I need this as well? Yeah. Crash effect reduction, as the name says. Always turn it off for maximum immersion. You need to hurt your hands if you crash. No, like, honestly, like, I would leave this on probably for safety. What do we have here? Overall gain. So this is from 0 to the maximum torque the bass supports. On the Premier we see 13 Newton meter. If we go lower here, 10, and so on. Then we have the typical mechanical filters, let's call it like that: damper, friction, inertia. What is what? Friction is constant resistance on the shaft. Damper is pretty much friction depending on the rotation speed. So if you rotate it slower, damping will basically do nothing. If you rotate it very fast, then the damping comes into effect. Think of it like oil in a damper. It's exactly doing that. Like the higher viscosity is like higher damping here. And then inertia, think of it as virtual weight added to your wheel. I typically, what I run here is 5% of damping, even with very high force feedback, and 2 points of inertia, and I have 0 oscillation issues on any of those. A spring is something you should just never use. There is more stuff in here. I have never used that, so we're just gonna pretend this does not exist. Here's the filtering. Keep in mind, it's a bit confusing. Grab the latest beta. The current one is version 5.3, because on the release version, I think it's like, this is filter off, this is minimum filtering, and like this is like maximum filtering. Like, who comes up with like that? Why? Anyways, they fixed it. Then here you can set the steering range, bump stop range, lock strength. But the interesting part is the force feedback mode. So direct input is pretty much like any other base. Then you can do pure telemetry. You can do iRacing 360, whatever, and you can go tick mode. Tick mode is what I would recommend. If you set it like this, you have 100% telemetry force feedback. If you set it like this, you have 100% direct input force feedback. What I like to run is typically something between 70 and 80, 85 here. So most of the force feedback is coming from the game, what the game intends to put out, and a little flavor added on top from the telemetry layer. You can configure this further if you click here. Make sure you have the VNM telemetry plugin. There's a plugin store where you need to download it. Make sure you did that, and it needs to be enabled here. And then we do have 8 different effects. Like the telemetry force feedback itself is just there. You can't adjust anything more in that. I would love to see that equalizer that we talked about earlier, but right now it's just there in the same way like the direct input force feedback is just there. So what we see here are the effects that you can add on top of it. You can disable them. For example, gear shift. I don't know why you would want to feel a gear shift on your steering wheel, so I would disable that. But here you can configure it quite extensively. You can set the waveform, how the effect should feel. Just, I mean, try them out. I don't want to go too much into detail. It's just different feeling effects. Then you have amplitude, that is like the maximum the effect can be. And gain, like how strong the in-game effect should be amplified, if that makes sense. And then frequency and duration is self-explanatory, I think. And vibration, always something I would turn off. I mean, try them out, see what you like, see what you dislike. Road texture is amazing. Play with the slider how much you want. ABS is helpful for simulations that do not have ABS on the steering wheel. iRacing, for example, I think they removed it. LMU has it on there, so I would not use it for LMU, but for iRacing, you can put this on your steering wheel. I do think it feels better on the pedals or on motion or on the belt tensioner, but if you don't have that, you can have it on your steering wheel and still feel the ABS. That's really useful. Same brake lockup. By the way, there's also the trigger that pretty much determines how sensitive these effects are. Then you can have wheel spin, understeer, oversteer. You see there are many different effects that you can put on top of your normal force feedback, and it really can help to feel the car. It's like, these are all things that you would have on a motion rig that you typically do not have available on a normal direct drive base. And with this, you can just add it on top. Pretty cool. Then one new thing in 5.3 is the configuration overlay. If you go to the preferences here, wheelbase, you can set different devices here. For example, I have the AMG steering wheel connected here as well. And then you can set several hotkeys, for example, to center the wheel. Why would you want to do that? Well, let's say you had a crash and your steering wheel is like this. Then you can sneakily in the pits, or like at some point, turn your steering wheel like this, set center, and your steering wheel is straight. Or the other way around. But you get the idea. But yeah. The useful stuff is overall gain, DI ratio, and overall filter that you can just put on buttons, and then you can quickly change it while you're in the game. If the UI is not running, see here on the bottom, that is visible even while you're in the game. You can increase, decrease the game. Very similar what Simucube did with the Simucube 3 with a little control box, but here you can do it with any input device pretty much. I think Simucube should add that to their bases as well. So for example, support that overlay on the Simucube 2. I think it's more convenient to have it on the wheel than on a box, but yeah. That's everything I wanted to say about the software. One little annoyance, whenever you change something, remember to click apply and save, because otherwise it will not take over the values. I don't know why but yeah, it is like it is. Just remember doing that. The software works well. Had zero issues with it, no crashes, no dropouts, no nothing. It just could use a UI designer. Okay, by the way, VNM also sent me this wheel to check out. If you want to see a review of that, please let me know in the comments down below. I give you a very quick overview. Great wheel, very affordable, good price, great shifters, great clutches, more than enough inputs. The buttons could use a tiny bit more resistance, but perfectly usable, fully SimUp compatible. It's a great wheel. The stickers you get with it are absolutely terrible, but apart from that, it's a great wheel. If you want to know more about it in detail, please let me know in the comments down below. Then I might do a separate video on that. This video here will already be long enough. Let's quickly talk about the driving experience. You have the instant torque response from this basis, a natural weight build-up, perfect slip feedback. You're always in control of the car. I think this is the base that gives me the most feedback of the car. Obviously, this is all still personal preference, so if you prefer a more numb force feedback, you can still do it here, but then all the benefits kind of disappear. You can still set it up however you want. It does feel very alive, especially on rough tracks like Sebring or Nordschleife, for example, or Rally. One thing I can absolutely recommend, LMU or iRacing, the sim almost doesn't matter. An LMP2 car at Sebring, that is just such an insane experience with this. Set the force feedback to tick mode, go with like 70%. You don't even need any of the telemetry effects necessarily, but maybe the road texture. But just the telemetry force feedback is, oh, it feels so good. It's quite the experience. That is very, very different to anything else on the market right now. There's no dead zone, there's no mechanical noise. This is a very quiet bass. Like some basses will be a bit noisy, this not really. And it feels very believable, like you're steering a car. Oscillations, even though I run very, very low dampening and inertia and friction, have absolutely not been any issues on the VNM bases. And even the 13 Nm bass pretty much feels the same. Just a tiny, tiny bit faster than the Xtreme, and obviously less torque headroom. It will heat up quicker, but still, like, don't worry about heat on a direct drive. It's an electric motor that you stop from turning. It gets warm, that's normal. So yeah, not the Premier, but the Xtreme on the floor here is my go-to bass at the moment. How does it compare to the other options on the market? I think there are several bases we need to mention here. I think the biggest competitor is the VRS DFP20. This is still one of the best overall bases. It is slightly less powerful than the Xtreme, so a little smaller dynamic range. I measured it at 23 Newton meters. The Xtreme I measured at 32, this one at 13.5, I think. VRS will be adding telemetry force feedback soon. I do think the VNM overall feels a little bit smoother and more connected to the road. Like, you probably get it now, I'm really a big fan of this telemetry layer. The VRS has more this precise mechanical linearity, but there's also a new firmware coming for the VRS with their next gen force feedback, which is excellent. Like the direct input on the VRS with the next gen firmware might be for direct input force feedback the best on the market right now, but I need to properly test this in the coming weeks. This is where I wish the VNM had a little bit more adjustability in the filter for the direct input. But in general, the VNM and the VRS are my two go-to recommendations for people that look for a new bass at the moment. Another big name to mention here is the Asetek Invicta Forte La Prima basses. Also great build, a little bit more bling bling, a little bit more plastic. Pretty good force feedback, no telemetry stuff. I don't know if they're working on something like that. And also great USB pass-through on there. I think they were actually the first with a pass-through, at least from my knowledge. If there was anyone else before, let me know in the comments below. But to me, the VNM feels a bit more responsive, a little bit smoother, more believable, more tweakable. And also the Asetek bases to me feel more like at the end of their lifespan, whereas the VNM still feels early in that product cycle, but I might be wrong there. Then of course we have to mention Simucube, the Simucube 2, the Simucube 3 now, the benchmark for refinement and polish. And I think the VNM matches the detail and force feedback quality of the Simucube. It surpasses it at torque per price. It adds USB pass-through and the big selling factor, the telemetry stuff. Simucube 3 also has telemetry effects coming. I think it's too early to really compare it because the review software isn't even available yet. Currently, the telemetry stuff on the VNM is a bit better than on the Simucube 3, but in the end, this is all software, firmware, so we'll see how it goes in the future. The Simucube has the significantly cleaner UI. Tuner 3 looks great, but I think the innovation pace at Simucube is a little bit slower. It's not as experimental and fast as VNM, but therefore maybe a bit more polished, a bit more mature. However, as of today, the Simucube 3 does not have telemetry force feedback. Like, it has the effects and something that comes close to it with the steering forces, but it's not there yet. I will talk more about this comparison in my full Simucube 3 review that will be coming in the next few weeks when we actually get the release firmware. And another base I want to talk about is, of course, the Simagic Alpha Evo lineup, especially with the new Ultimate that is coming. Also really, really good bases. I feel like Alpha Evo and Simucube 3 are to me comparable because they have this low inertia motor design, or at least feel. The Alpha Evo Ultimate and the Simucube 3 Pro to me feel very, very similar. You do have USB pass-through on the Simagic, also works very, very well. But overall, the VNM still has the edge to me over those. But Simagic also told me that they are working on telemetry stuff. So I think 26 can be very, very interesting in the direct drive market. Let's talk about the weak points. Yes, the space also has some weak points. The slip ring is powered by 5 volt from the USB cable. So whatever you feed into that is the power your wheel will have. I'd love to see a base using 12 volt or 9 volts. I think that does help with signal quality and powering power-hungry wheels. That's what I've been doing on the Suzuki Community QR project that is running for a few years now. And I see quite a nice impact on the signal quality and power supply, obviously. When we talk about weak points, we have to talk about the software that just doesn't look very modern. It's not a big deal. Only front mounting on the Xtreme is a little shame. I would love to see the side mounting and the bottom mounting there too. And of course, the big strong point, telemetry force feedback, only really is a benefit if the telemetry output from the game is good. So while this is not VNM's fault, you are relying on the telemetry quality from the game. Value and future outlook. I mean, the Xtreme at 1,380 euros, I think is the best high-end torque per euro base on the market today. The Premier at 699 is an incredible mid-range value. We have what I think is the fastest moving firmware ecosystem in the whole direct drive world, thanks to that big Discord community and responsiveness of the support and developers there. And at this point, I mean, we don't know what will happen with software evolving, firmware evolving, but this is still my #1 recommendation going into 26, unless SimLab drops something wild or other base manufacturers really improve their software, firmware. It will be interesting in 26 and it will be a highly competitive market, I think. I also plan to make a new version of my Big 4 direct drive comparison, or like Big 5 now probably. We'll have the Simucube 3, we'll have the VRS stuff with the next gen force feedback. Of course, we'll have SimLab, we'll have VNM, and maybe also Fanatec with their new Podium DD. If the Fanatec Podium DD is like the DD Plus, just with more torque, then that will be an excellent high-end base as well, I think. But I can't wait to make this big video. It will probably be a lot of work, but I bought all the measurement equipment, torque sensor, for example, to really measure the bases so that you can get useless numbers, but tell your friend that your base has a bigger number than his. So yeah, let's see how that goes and who will dominate the direct drive market in terms of force feedback in 26. My final verdict, the VNM has earned my daily driver spot. Whenever I'm done with reviewing a bass, I'm going back to the VNM Xtreme, because this Xtreme gives you pretty much Simucube level precision in force feedback with true USB pass-through. You get higher torque and you have a team that listens faster than anyone else to your feedback. If the software ever looks half as good as the bass performs, I think the rest of the market is in serious trouble. VNM needs to improve regarding distribution of these updates and documentation, but for me there currently is nothing better than this line of basses on the market. But keep in mind, force feedback is a very subjective topic. Only because I prefer this bass doesn't mean that it will be the best choice for you. If you can, always try to test as many basses as possible, but that is difficult. I mean, if you're in Germany, go visit Simrace shop. They have a lot of basses available that you can probably test easily and get like a rough A to B comparison, or like as close as it gets to that. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel to not miss any future videos. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below the video. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Also, I had to record this freaking review twice because I forgot to put a SD card in my camera.